What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast UFC betting preview, which is going to live exclusively on the Action Network's YouTube channel during football season. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward, and we're going to help you break down the UFC card going down this weekend on Saturday at the Apex. 12 fights, prelims start at 4, main card, 5-fight main card starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time. The main event, Sean Brady minus 185 against Gilbert Burns plus 160. Burns 38 years old, Brady 31. Typically, when you get that 7-year age differential between opponents, the older fighter is overvalued by about 12% in the betting market. They win 12 to 14% less often than their betting odds indicate. So I would initially lean to Brady on top of the fact that Gilbert Burns has been dealing with injuries in recent fights. He was injured in round 1 against Bilal Muhammad. And then he also gassed out in his last fight against Jack Maddalena. He was winning on 2 of the 3 scorecards heading into round 3, ended up getting knocked out via a knee. I think his athleticism is declining. I think physically he looks slower, doesn't look as strong as he used to. And the injuries piling up is also a significant concern and note as well. Brady, the younger guy, the better wrestler. Burns is the better striker and the better offensive submission grappler, is an ADC decorated jiu-jitsu practitioner. But that said, I think the athleticism for Brady, I think the physicality for Brady, his awkward wrestling style is just going to make this ugly and make it difficult for Burns to really have a lot of success offensively. I do like the under or the ends inside the distance, though, even though we could see a lot of grappling, a lot of stalling between these two, potentially a lot of just top control position time for Brady. I think both guys are fragile. And I'm concerned not only about Burns' durability, but also Brady's cardio in a 5-round fight, even both of their cardio in a 5-round fight, frankly, but more so Brady. He's tired out at the end of his 3-round fights. Burns tired out, as I said, in his last fight against Bilal Maddalena. Could see Burns absolutely locking in a submission against anybody. And on the feet, if he's able to counter grapple, keep this fight standing, I think he can knock Brady out as well. That fight against Bilal was a pretty bad look for Brady. I know it's the champion. You know, I'm not going to say he was fraud checked. I think anybody saying that was a fraud check against the UFC champion is a little ridiculous. But at the same time, it was not a good look. He tired pretty quickly, and he got knocked out with relative ease by a guy who carries very little power and has put almost nobody away at the UFC level. So if he gets caught in the same position against Gilbert Burns, I think Burns can put him away as well. And over 5 rounds, I think the likelihood that one of these guys tires, gasses out completely, leads to a cardio finish or submission from Burns or knockout from Burns. I think it's all within the realm of possibility. So the fight to end inside the distance at minus 110 is my favorite way to bet this fight. Billy, how do you see this one playing out? I know you agree on the side, but I don't know if it's actually a bet for you or if it's just a lean.
Yeah, I bet Sean Brady. I took him fairly early in the week. I wasn't sure which way this line was going to go. Kind of expected more action on Brady. I think you can get as low as minus 180 right now. I took minus 185. I know you were hoping for a little bit better price. You might still get it. So, keep your eyes on that one as we go. I wish we had a better way to describe we think a fighter's going to get tired by saying they have bad cardio. Because Gilbert Burns does not have bad cardio. If you've seen his workout videos, the man's a machine. But his style as a high grappling, high pace guy who's small for the division is going to lead to him getting tired out. It's not because he's in bad shape. He's a former lightweight. He's kind of a tweener. I think he's one of those guys where if they had a 160 or 165 class, he would have been a long running champion of that class. He's just a little too small for 170. Brady's bigger, stronger, more athletic at this point. the big reason I'm on Brady, I think, is these grappling exchanges are going to take more out of Burns than they do out of Brady because of that size difference. You know, we'll say they're even in the grappling when you weigh the wrestling and jiu-jitsu against each other. But if Burns is carrying a bigger guy for extended stretches, he's going to gas out before Brady. I think we don't know with Sean Brady in a 5-round fight. We've seen Gilbert do it before, mixed results depending on how the fight's going. So it's a little bit scary on that. But yeah, just the youth and the athleticism is enough for me on Brady. Usually Gilbert Burns' submission grappling advantage is so big over his opponents. It's not that big over Brady. Like Brady has a competitive grappling win over Craig Jones. He does a lot of pro grappling events. He's not Gilbert Burns, but he's about as close as we're going to get in the welterweight division. So that makes me feel a little bit better too. Striking, Gilbert should have the advantage. Brady's been looking better. He's been making improvements. Would still give it to Gilbert, but I don't think this is a striking match for all that long. Because Brady, even if he can't get a takedown, can shove him against the fence and be the bigger guy, be the bully. So yeah, minus 185 I took. I'd probably play it to about minus 200. Like the ends inside the distance. Then the logical conclusion from what we've both said is Brady inside the distance, but that might be a little bit risky.
Yeah, I feel like Brady via round 4 ground and pound is kind of how I see his finish coming. Yeah, I'm waiting for a better price. Minus 185 currently. That's roughly where I projected it at minus 185, minus 190. I want minus 175 or better. We'll see if it gets there. It was there a couple weeks ago. It's been at about the same line for roughly the past 2 weeks, but we've seen so much steam come in on fight day on either side of fights. You know, Brady may end up shooting up to minus 225. It's very possible. Just feel like these lines are blowing out like crazy on fight day of late. Let's go to our fight of the night. Co-main event, Jessica Andrade plus 260 against Natalia Silva minus 295. I think, like Burns, Andrade is getting a little bit too much underdog love here. So the way I handicap these fights out, if you're unfamiliar, I'm looking at publicly available data, seeing how often people are picking these fighters to win, both in terms of betting markets and also just prediction markets, and then comparing them to the betting odds. And I have a way of weighting all that data together. Well, Burns getting picked to win his fight about 40 to 45% of the time. His vig free line closer to 37%. Andrade getting picked to win the fight about 31 to 35% of the time. Her vig free line closer to 27%. You know, there are instances where the favorite is getting 80% of the action on those picks, and the underdog is plus 150, and I very clearly know where the sharp side is. In these instances, it seems like the underdogs are a little bit overbet, and neither of those are particularly surprising because these are instances where it's an older fighter with a bigger fan base, more name recognition going against a young up-and-comer. You're getting plus money on that older, more recognizable fighter. Those are the exact things that lead to these fighters being overbet. Not sure, actually, I forgot to look up, Billy, the age differential between Andrade and Silva, if that also lends itself to the age angle I mentioned. But Silva bigger. She's 3 inches taller, 3-inch reach advantage. Andrade is coming up from 115 to 125 for this fight. She has fought at, 135, 125, 115. She's one of only 3 fighters, I believe, along with Conor McGregor and Jared Cannonier, to have finishes across 3 different UFC divisions as well. But she spent her past 4 fights at strawweight. And when she loses, she tends to get finished in 5 of her past 6 losses. The last time she fought at 125, she lost to Erin Blanchfield. And I also think her style is going to put her in dangerous positions against Natalia Silva as well. She's very aggressive, rushes forward, but Silva is a really good counter fighter, and she's very fast. And I think she's going to have the power edge over Andrade as well. So Silva should have her covered. I think if she justifies the money line price, she ends this one inside the distance. So Silva ITD plus 200. Silva by submission at plus 1150, because when Andrade, as I said, when Andrade is losing, she tends to find a way out. And often the best way to find that way out is to give up a submission. And then the fight to end inside the distance at plus 115 as well. Not going to not have a piece of Andrade potentially finishing this fight. Silva got finished earlier in her career regionally. Andrade is the most finishes in like all UFC women's division. She owns pretty much every record. So I need to have something on the under, but I do like Silva to actually be the one to finish the fight. Billy, did any info on that age angle I might have mentioned?
Yeah, about a 5-year gap, 5.5
Okay,
years.
5.
Which is, it's similar to the main event. And the more you were talking, the more I've thought that these fights are kind of the same setup. Like, we know what the UFC is trying to do here. They're not pushing 38-year-old Gilbert Burns for a title fight against a guy he already lost to. Brady lost to the same guy too, which makes it a little bit trickier. But Brady's 31. We don't expect Bilal to have the belt forever, to put it mildly. And then same thing down in this women's fight. Like Andrade, former champion, fought across all these weight classes, probably not going to challenge for a title ever again. I would bet fairly heavily on that. Natalia Silva, 27 years old, exciting prospect, fun striking style. They put these matches together this way for a reason. 100% agree with you on the counter striking bit. Natalia Silva's striking is so much sharper. She's not as much of a brawler as Andrade, but she's also bigger, faster, and the sharper striker. You can't overcome all three of those things on the feet, right? If you're going to be the brawler, you're going to be Jessica Andrade. It works really well at 115 when you can physically overpower people, pick Rose up and slam her all hard, that kind of stuff. I don't think that plays up to 125. She's 5'1". She's tiny for this division. Silva's not huge or super muscular or anything relative to the division, but when she's got that sharp striking, I think that more than makes up for it. I didn't have anything on this originally. You talked me into it when we were talking last night about inside the distance. I think that's really sharp. Both sides, both the fight and inside the distance, but primarily just Silva to pick up a finish. Similarly, you could go Silva -3.5 if you think she dominates this one and doesn't get a finish. Price isn't as good, shouldn't be as good, obviously. I think that's kind of the coward's way to make this bet, but I'm riding with you on the +200.
I get worried with the -3.5 because she is a counter striker. And if Andrade doesn't decide to force the issue, which is what would lead to the finish, it could be a low volume outside striking match where Silva doesn't like pour on the volume or really initiate engagements, significantly. She's not applying pressure. So
she's a sniper.
Yeah. So pressure fighters, I feel like win 30-27s cleaner than back foot counter fighters. So that's why I'd be a little bit more hesitant to lay the 3.5. But even looking at her recent, like her UFC fights, Viviane Araújo is pretty durable. Andrea Lee is super durable. I mean, she dominated that fight, but Lee is like super, super durable. She knocked out Leonardo. She knocked out Teresa Bleda. I think Bleda is pretty durable. I think Bleda has a UFC since then as well. And she beat Jasmine Jasudavicius in her debut. Jasmine is super durable. So, amongst the fighters she's fought, I think Andrade is both smaller and significantly less durable than all of that group. We look at Jessica Andrade as such a tough fighter because of all the finishes she has, but in reality, I don't think that's the case. She's a bit of a glass cannon. So, yeah, I think she'll look for a way out, and I think Silva by submission, +1150 is what I got. I like that down to +900, +800. I think that's an interesting long shot poke for this weekend. There are some underdogs that we do like, though, not going shock heavy on this card. And one consensus underdog that we might have, Tony Sartori, one of our colleagues, gave this out as his best bet in our group chat last night. So he's writing up that bet for this weekend in our best bets column. You can find on actionnetwork.com and in the Action Network app. But he stole that from Billy. Billy wanted this one. He took it away. Billy, I know you have a couple angles that you like on this fight, but you did have this one in there first. I'll fill on the gaps for the points you don't make. Tell me why you like Dos Santos against Lima.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky because he looked really good in his debut. This is Dos Santos I'm speaking of. Took his debut against Manel Kape on short notice. Looked really good. Went to a close decision, got rocked in there, but rallied back, was competitive in the striking. Couldn't really get Kape down. Dos Santos is a shoot-to-box fighter. He's really got that Chucky Olive style where he's got great jiu-jitsu, solid Muay Thai. And if he could get on top of anyone ever, he's going to maul him on the ground. It doesn't happen often because the wrestling's not great. But, against a guy like Kape, who's a good wrestler, hard to take down, we saw that. In his next fight, split decision against Victor Altamirano. Did not look as good. Kind of struggled in the boxing. I like the matchup here against Andre Lima, who is a converted kickboxer. Really good Muay Thai. But Lima likes to clinch. And anytime you like to clinch to use your Muay Thai, you're giving opportunities for the takedown. And also, Dos Santos might beat him in a straight clinch fight. I think at range, Lima's going to look at like the better fighter. I think in the clinch, it's going to be close, but Dos Santos has some size and some length that could help him in there. And if it gets to the ground, Felipe Dos Santos should be -2,000 or something. So we throw that in there. And then the fact, I just wasn't that impressed by Andre Lima. He was losing his fight to Igor Severino before he got bit. Weird fight. He got the tattoo. They gave him the double bonus. All that stuff happened. But he was losing that fight. Mm-hmm. And then in his next fight, Mitch Raposo came in on short notice. Lima needed a split decision. He grabbed the fence like 2 or 3 times. He poked him in the eye 3 times, and he missed weight by 4 pounds. That's leading into what I'm going to give out in props. But all of that tells me is that he's a little bit overvalued by the market just based on the 2-0 record, where he's really not that good. On the flip side, Dos Santos, had he had a normal UFC debut where they didn't throw him in there with a top 5 flyweight on short notice, he might be 2-0. So there's a little bit of misalignment in the market, I would say, with Dos Santos being plus 155.
Yeah, completely agree. Also, the fight juiced to go to a decision north of minus 200. We always like taking the dog in fights that are favored to go to a decision. I like Dos Santos by decision as well at plus 310, but I also like his money line. And I think the best spot might be live after round 1. I don't think Lima has good cardio. Lima also, as you mentioned, missed weight last time out against Mitch Raposo. Keep an eye on the scales on Friday. If Lima has a tough weight cut, if he misses weight again, I'm probably going to like Dos Santos even more than I do now. But I definitely like Dos Santos live after round 1. I like his money line pre-fight, and I like him by decision. I also want to mention, he's the 3-inch reach advantage. He has better volume. The split over Mitch Raposo, Billy, Mitch Raposo shouldn't be in the UFC. Mitch Raposo lost the Jake Hadley on Contender Series. He was the 3rd booking for that fight. He took that fight on super short notice. He was the 3rd opponent booked against Lima in that fight. Lima faded in the 3rd round, won a split. And as you mentioned, he was also losing to Igor Severino before he got bit. So, yeah, I think there's a ton pointing to Dos Santos in this fight. He's also, Dos Santos, I was on Altamirano against him, lost that split decision. Altamirano took him down 9 times. I don't think we see much grappling in this fight. So, aside from the clinch, but I don't think we see much top time or much time of them on the ground, grappling. I think if any grappling happens, it's likely to be up against the fence. So, yeah, Dos Santos plus money the side for me. But, Billy, you've got another angle that you like in this fight. And considering the way Lima's last fight played out, maybe you get another one.
Yeah, I alluded to it a little bit here, but in his last fight, not only did he miss weight by 4 pounds against a guy who you pointed out shouldn't be in the UFC, was the 3rd opponent coming in on. The other guy was coming in on short notice and made weight, and you missed weight by 4 pounds, Andre Lima. That's not really the point. But he also poked Mitch Raposo in the eye at least 3 times. After the second one, whoever the ref was told him it was a hard warning, and then he did it again, and they didn't take a point. Like, what is a hard warning if you don't lose a point the next time? And then when Raposo was trying to grapple, he grabbed the fence blatantly once and maybe a second time. In the blatant one, it wasn't like a reaction I reached back. He used it to pull himself back up and get out of the position. Here's my thesis on this. If you're Dos Santos' team, you're telling the ref ahead of time, look, he holds his fingers like this. He grabs the fence. Can you guys watch out for that? That's a conversation that happens before fights all the time in rules meetings. We know, this guy might kick you in the groin. Try to keep an eye on that for me. Whatever that people like to do. And if you're the ref and you watched his last fight, which I hope the refs go back and watch tape. I have no idea on that side of thing. You're like, okay, we can't let him poke someone in the eye 3 times. Point deduction in this fight is plus 2,000, 20-1 odds. I wish we could there's a way to just bet on him doing something illegal and not the point actually being taken away, because MMA is ridiculous with that. You can break the rules so many times. Again, my thesis here is that they've got their antenna up a little bit. They're watching a little bit more, and he actually loses a point for one of these things. And then just to loop back a little bit, you said not much grappling. If there is grappling, it's huge for Dos Santos, and it's huge for this bet because Andre Lima might try to climb up the fence again. So if there is grappling, it's good for both these bets we're on. If there's not, I still like both of them due to the eye pokes and the plus money on Dos Santos. So like it all around. Obviously, this is going to be my prop squad pick. It's like 0.1, 0.2 units. Don't get crazy, but it'll be a fun one. And one of the best sweats in the world is to watch an MMA fight hoping for a guy to cheat. It's just the most ridiculous fun you're ever going to have. So it's worth it for that alone.
Also, not to victim blame, but what did he do to get bit? Like, what did he say to Severino to get bit? He didn't just get bit for no reason, right? He must have said something or done something at some point to have triggered Severino biting him. So yeah, I don't know what Lima is doing inside the cage to trigger all of these illegal maneuvers, but something's going on in his fights. And yeah, 20-1, how wrong can you possibly be, considering it seems like he's going to commit the fouls? It's just a matter of whether the ref actually decides to deduct for it. I'm going to give out a couple more or a couple props and then throw it to Billy for one more. Vanessa Demopoulos plus 3.5 points. My favorite prop on this card. She keeps winning decisions that she shouldn't, but at the same time, she has a fighting style that makes fights closer than they probably should be. And she's at a significant size differential in this matchup. Jacqueline Amarine 9-inch reach advantage. She's also 7 years younger, so I don't want to bet too heavily on Demo here, but I do think she can keep the fight close. I think she can win at least a round without getting finished. Emery just does not throw volume at range. She will get on top and she'll land volume. She'll land ground and pound. She uses her long limbs to leverage herself up, but she does nothing on the feet. She will stand there and stare at you for 15 minutes. Demopoulos is going to be the one moving in and out, the one applying pressure, the one actually throwing volume. Even though Amarina has that reach advantage, I think Demopoulos should be able to get inside and actually land some things and do enough to win a round. So Vanessa Demopoulos plus the 3.5 points at -105. This was juiced to -125 offshore, which I always like to see, that big adjustment relative to the domestic price. Also like her by decision of plus 480. I would make that line closer to plus 350. It should be much more aligned with her money line than I really don't give her much finish equity in this fight. She's going to get a submission if she gets a finish, and I think her submitting Amarine is pretty low, but could see her making a competitive decision out of this. So plus 3.5 on Demopoulos, and then also by decision of plus 480. Couple more props, or a few more props I haven't bet yet, but I think are all interesting to me. The Kyle Nelson and Steve Garcia fight is a lightweight fight that is minus money to the under 1.5 rounds, plus 440 to go to a decision. Garcia's knocked out 5 of his past 6 opponents. I believe 4 of his past 5. I think 5 of 6, 4 in a row. I mean, is he the Francis Ngannou of lightweight? Like, at some point, there will be regression with the knockout rate. Not going to knock out everybody forever. And honestly, some of those knockout wins have aged pretty well. Like the guys he knocked out, in hindsight, good wins. And wins over guys who I consider relatively durable. But Nelson, to me, is more of a point fighter. And he's happy to stay on the outside and slow this one down and clinch and make things dirty. And he's constantly underrated as an underdog. He's another big underdog here. I think if Garcia gets the knockout, it's actually later in this fight. I think it's more likely due to cardio and attrition, and it comes in round 2 and round 3, because I think he's younger, has better cardio. I like his volume more across 15 minutes. That said, fight to go to a decision plus 440, Nelson by decision of plus 850. Those are long. Those are probably both double what they should be. I think plus 220 and plus 425 on those are fair prices, especially considering where the money line is. So yeah, I expect some knockout regression for Steve Garcia at some point. Maybe he gets another KO here and sets up a bigger fade on his knockout prop in the future. And then lastly, Trevor Peek in a pick'em fight, basically -130 favored. His opponent has never been knocked out. I do think he's more of a grappler though, and I just may need to play into the price adjustment on Peek KO relative to his previous fights. He was a plus 230 dog in his last fight against Charlie Campbell. Sorry, he was a plus 125 underdog in his last fight against Charlie Campbell. His knockout prop was plus 230. He was a even money. He was a -200 favorite against Muhammad Yahya, even money to win by knockout. Now he's a -130 favorite, plus 300 to win by knockout. As he's gotten decisions, as he's gone to decision, as he's moved away from knocking out all of his opponents, his KO odds have continued to tick up. So I think I'm going to buy back on some Peek KO at plus 300. I expected that to be, again, half the price, plus 150, plus 200. So those are my props. Demopoulos plus 3.5 and by decision. Nelson goes to decision plus 440, wins by decision plus 850. We'll see if I play the latter. Probably almost certainly going to play the goes to decision of plus 440. And then Trevor Peek by knockout at plus 300. Billy, you give out Lima dos Santos point deduction at plus 2,000. You also like your guy, Andre Petrosky, inside the distance at plus 245. Tell me why.
Yeah, you almost set it up by talking about Trevor Peek, because it's a very similar effect where for a while in there, we expected Andre Petrosky to finish everyone. He loses 2 in a row. One was extremely short notice to Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira is destroying everyone at middleweight, and he took it on like 3 days notice. We'll give him a pass there. The next one is when he headbutted Jacob Malkoon's hip on a shot and knocked himself out, which... Okay, I mean, I can't say I've ever seen that happen before. That sucks, but like he wasn't losing that fight, right? He was doing fine. Then he comes out against Josh Fremd and fights really cautiously. He gets 12.5 minutes of control time in a 15-minute fight. 1 takedown each round. Didn't do much with it. I think there's a psychological element here where you're on a 2-fight losing streak. They were weird losses, but that doesn't matter. You lose 3 in the UFC, you're probably done. No one no one's going to be up in arms if they cut Andre Petroski on a 3-fight losing streak. He needed that win. Now, in a weird bit of matchmaking, now they gave him 0-1 Dylan Budka after he just fought 3 fairly tough dudes, or 2 really tough dudes. Jacob Malkoun, your opinion may vary, whatever. When he was fighting guys like that, guys like Michael Gilmore and Hu Yaozong and Nick Maximo, he was finishing them all. Andre Petroski is a great grappler. He trains with Sean Brady. I'm sure they've been working really hard together in camp, with his fight being on the same day. Tons of grappling, tons of high pace. I think he's going to go back and be that aggressive self again. He got some blowback for being boring in the last fight. Probably wants to get a 50K bonus, not just his win check here. And it's just too far away from his money line odds. He's a pretty heavy favorite. I got to look exactly what it is now, but north of -200 for sure. And we're getting plus 240. I think it's down to plus 230. Plus 230 on his inside the distance odds. Those should be closer together. The longer this one goes, I think the more it benefits Budka, because Petroski does get tired with all that grappling. I like that one. Again, another one where you could do the -3.5, because when Petroski wins a round, it's pretty clear because he wins it with top control. I'm not going that way. I'm shooting for the inside the distance, but I get the -3.5 as well.
Yeah, I would not lay the money line of Petroski. One, because of the cardio issue. 2, because of the tendency we've seen from wrestlers recently to not wrestle. And the rumors we've gotten about the UFC privately telling guys, you should stop wrestling and strike a little more. So if Petroski comes out and tries to strike this one out, and you're holding a -275 ticket, you're not going to be very happy about that. With an inside the distance ticket, sure, fire away. No, I agree.
The nice thing about that, though, the nice thing about that, though, is Dylan Budka can't strike either. So you're not going to be happy with the ticket because of the price, but it's going to be just like a 50-50 stupid slugfest if they strike. So you're not, again, to your point, the inside the distance ticket is probably still okay there. The money line would be real sad. Neither of these guys are good strikers. They might strike, but they're not great at it.
Yeah, Petroski hits hard. He's not technical, but he does have power. And I didn't mention it with the main event, but like that is part of my theory with the inside of distance and the under there is oftentimes when you get 2 grapplers, they end up striking it out. The Bilal Brady fight, that's what they did. So I think there's a chance that by choice, they end up on the feet, or Burns just counter grapples early and it's forced to stay on the feet and somebody gets finished. But yeah, I could see the potential, 2 wrestlers, Petroski, Budka, potential that they stay on the feet and Petroski knocks him out. But yeah, I would not lay that money line. That would not, no part of that. I don't really like Budka's cardio either, though. So I think this is actually a pretty good matchup for Petroski. He's had a couple of round 3 finishes before. I wouldn't be surprised if he had another late finish here again. Like dominates with the wrestling, progresses, tires out his opponent, and then ends up getting the finish. So that's the only pushback I give you. I'm actually not super worried about him if the fight extends, but I still don't like the money line. I don't want any part of that, considering the potential that he may not wrestle. You just never know at this point.
These Henzo Philly Gracie guys, they're all like the same dude. Like if you look at them physically, they're all super jacked up, powerful dudes, but they're almost too muscle bound to like strike smoothly. So when they hit you, you stay hit, to quote Quentin Rampage Jackson. But they don't hit you that often because they're all stiff and built. But it's Brady, Petroski, and then Jeremiah Wells. I don't know what's in the water out there or what they're giving these guys. Don't want to speculate. But yeah, they all have this weird, like very square, stiff build. Where yeah, you don't want to get hit by them. You probably won't, but they're going to finish you if they do.
Yeah, big, broad-shouldered, kind of load up for the power punches, but it's like over, it's like or like ducking overhands that they load up for, but there's no like technique behind the boxing or I think Brady is certainly the best of the bunch. And we'll see how he fares in this main event, but I think their style as a gym is extremely effective and like a very high floor style, but at the same time, it's not super duper exciting unless they actually clip people early, like when Wells knocked Court McGee into the netherworld. Let's go on to some best bets. I've got a big juicy best bet. I've got a greasy theory this week. Let's just go for it. Matt Danger Schnell plus 250. I think this line is way off. Now, my theory is that when you bet on a guy who, if he loses, it's going to look horrible for you, there's value on those fighters. The Jason Witts, the Matt Schnells, guys who have no chin, who, if they get clipped once, your money's going to get burned up, but also you're just going to feel terrible about it because it feels so much worse having a guy get knocked out than it does losing a split decision, getting robbed. Like, I would rather get robbed via split than have my guy get cold cocked on the first exchange of the fight and lose a ticket. I think I would. And I feel like most people agree that way, because you'd rather complain that you got robbed than go, why did I bet that? That guy just got knocked out cold on the first punch. Matt Schnell has no chin at this point. I think it's pretty evident. But at the same time, he's getting a matchup that is probably among the more favorable that he could get in the flyweight division. Not to mention the fact that Cody Durden, by the way, they're the same age. I expected Durden to be like 5 or 6 years younger when I looked. I always forget Cody Durden is 33. So they're basically the same age. They're both coming off of knockout losses. Durden got knocked out 2 months ago. Durden is also taking this fight on a week's notice without a corner. It's just him and his wife. They packed up their bags. They're flying out to Vegas. They got the fight notice like 2 days ago. So he doesn't have a corner. He did not train for this fight. He's a minus 350 favorite against the guy who is a better striker with better cardio. And both knocked out. Both of them were knocked out within the past 4 or 5 months. Durden can knock him out for sure. He has power in his hands. I think he's an underrated fighter overall. Even in his last fight where I bet against him with Bruno Silva, he was winning that fight before getting knocked out. But I think he really needs to just sort of like suffocate with the grappling here in order to win this fight. That's his style. He's probably not going to just come out and demolish Matt Schnell with one big overhand like you would expect him to at a minus 350 clip. He needs to wrestle to cover that price. And I think Matt Schnell is the better fighter. I think he's the more skilled fighter. I think he may even be the better athlete. He's quicker, better hands. He's a better boxer. He may even be the better submission grappler, frankly. Durden has the wrestling advantage, but that's not Schnell's issue, typically. Schnell's issue is his chin. And even, against Steve Erceg, his last fight, he was super competitive in the first round. I think you could have made an argument that he won that first round. Erceg got it on all 3 scorecards, but that's like as close of a unanimous 50-50 or 50-50 unanimous round as you'll see. You easily could have made an argument for Schnell. I bet on Erceg's money line. Erceg knocked him out in round 2. Sweating a little bit on Erceg after that first round because I thought it was close. So, yeah, Matt Schnell plus 250. If he doesn't get knocked out, he looks like a favorite, in my opinion, or at least a pick'em. I think this fight is a pick'em at worst if he doesn't get clipped and knocked out. And as I said, there's so many things working against Durden here. The recent knockout, the short notice, not having a corner, didn't train for this fight. Yeah, give me Matt Schnell plus 250. Billy, any agreement on the Schnell pick? Any interest in joining me there? And then you have a best bet on the Trevor Peek fight that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, I'm definitely joining you there. Those were some great points. The only thing I would add on is that short notice doesn't affect all fighters the same way. Cody Durden is like a high pressure wrestler. He's going to take you down 50 times. That's the hardest thing cardio to do. Right. If you tell me like, an Israel Adesanya or Anderson Silva style fighters coming in there, they kind of just stand in one place and dodge you by an inch and knock you out. Anyway, you can do that and not get tired, but you can't wrestle for 10, 15 minutes and not be gassed. I didn't know the story about his wife as his cornerman. Like, how does he not know someone in Vegas who has a cornerman's license? Like,
he went with the Mike Perry approach this week. It's the
call Dan Tom. Like,
we'll get Mike Perry's wife in there too. He should have his wife and Mike Perry's wife as his 2 corners, since she's an experienced corner. So
there you go. He's got to call our boy Dan Tom, action contributor. I'm sure would be glad to go down there and corner him. But yeah, no, you thoroughly convinced me. I was leaning that way anyway. Hadn't pulled the trigger. Yeah, the only other one, mine's more of a final bet. It aligns with your Peek knockout. Trevor Peek versus Yanal Ashmouz not to go to a decision at minus 105. Like 2 Trevor Peek fights ago, all of his fights were like minus 10,000 to end inside the distance because he was this wild brawler. He tried to do the conservative, I just need some wins thing. It kind of worked. It kind of didn't. He's had some success there. It worked when it was a surprise because you thought Trevor Peek was going to come out and try to kill you. I think he's going back to brawling, good old, down home Trevor Peek, especially because Yanal Ashmouz, also a power striker, had a first round knockout in his UFC debut. I think this should be basically just a brawl between these 2 guys who are more interested in a fight of the night bonus than they are actually getting the win. So a little bit bet on the psychology, but a lot of what you said with I expect some regression here. And then Ashmouz does have some grappling. So he gets a takedown or Peek goes back to the takedown and grapples himself into a submission would not shock me either. That's why I'm playing that over the fight ends by knockout.
Not his last fight, because that was in the Apex, but the 2 fights before that, the Muhammad Yahya fight, which was his decision, and the Chepe Mariscal fight, which was the first fight where he took a more conservative approach. Those were both in bigger cages. Those were not in the Apex. I think Trevor Peek in the Apex is, as I said, his last fight against Charlie Campbell, also in the Apex, it was a bit of a brawl. I think Peek in the Apex is a different fighter. I think it causes a different fight. And I'm sure like he sees a little bit more red when his opponent is 5 feet away from him instead of 20 feet away in the bigger cage. One more fight I want to discuss before we get out of here, Billy. The first fight on the card, this was rebooked from a couple of weeks ago. We discussed it with our guest, Patty Pimblett. If you missed that interview, you should go back and watch it. Nathan Fletcher against Zigomanis Ramashka. Fletcher was about a -160 favorite before that fight was canceled. I'm assuming he had a stomach illness or something the day of the fight, because it was canceled the day of the fight, rebooked immediately for 2 weeks later, which said to me, like, Fletcher probably just had a stomach bug that day. Big price adjustment, though. He's gone from, as I said, -160 to -125. I think I'm buying in on Fletcher after the price adjustment. Any interest from you?
I really wanted to take Fletcher by submission. Just if you look at his record, but more importantly, what Patty told us about him, where he's very heavily grappling baits, it's always hunting chokes, all that. But it's like +130. It's not that much different than his money line. So the books must have listened to Patty when we had him on. So yeah, I think the money line's the way to play that now, just because of that adjustment. I was hoping to get the sub. Otherwise, I'm probably passing.
I don't think the submission prop, and that's interesting too. I don't think the submission prop adjusted relative to the first booking. So I said his money line has crashed 30 cents. You know, and it did even the day of the fight. I should say the money line crashed 30 cents. It did the day of the fight. I assume that had something to do with people knowing Fletcher was not healthy that day. But the fact that it reopened in the same spot, or has at least been bet to the same spot, is interesting to me. The inside the distance prop has also changed significantly as well. It was like -550 for the first booking. I feel like it's half that now. It's like it's like -250, -300. So there's been like pretty significant odds adjustment on this fight. Yeah, it's -225. It was -550 before it was canceled for the last fight. That'll do it for our UFC betting preview on the Action Network's YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our content on actionnetwork.com. You can find my preview for the main event, our best bets for the card. Billy also has his luck ratings and other content up there. You should check out Billy's Nerfy model and all of his NFL content on actionnetwork.com and in the Action Network app as well. Make sure to download our free award-winning Action Network app, and make sure to subscribe to Action Pro. Use promo code POD20 to get $20 off an annual subscription. You'll get quicker notifications to all of our bets from myself, Stuckey, Colin Wilson, Sean Kerner, and all the other Action Network experts. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. We'll see you next week to preview UFC at the Sphere.